Hello there, genuine philosophers and spirits. Um, we are beginning a new series now that these sessions of spirit have ended. We're going to get into the curriculum of absolute spirit, which is Hegel's works predominantly. As we build out, we will cover more philosophers using his system. But of course, Hegel did something that was very unique, and nobody has repeated it before or after. And that's why we're going to explore him directly as the central figure, because he explored and brought together philosophy as a whole in a way which pays respects to other philosophers. And we can go in and we can sort of find errors in his method perhaps, but the direction he set is still relevant today. So what we're going to do in these sessions is, you can see on the screen my camera and some positive reinforcement, because sometimes philosophy can be difficult. You're ideal, beautiful, amazing, but philosophy is supposed to be positive. But if you look up at the top here, I don't think you can see it with my finger past it, but there's the wisdom quiz, there's a bunch of statistics, synchronicity, document of philosophies, live sublations, world Bible study, world Quran study, worldwide Veda, worldwide Tripitaka, which is Buddhism. And then there's these Nobel Prizes on your right hand side, and the days have to be updated. I think there's only 159 days left. So maybe I should update that very quickly just to show you how I'm doing it. Like that. I think there's about 159 left to the deadline before you can be nominated for the kind of work we're going to be doing here today. So if you get excited by what I've discovered while reading Hegel directly for over 3,000 hours now myself, if you realize what I've realized, that he was far more profound than anybody else has really realized. And there's this split happening between Hegel scholars, between what he actually said in terms of right Hegelianism, which is more conservative, more traditional, more religious, because Hegel claimed to be a Christian and he went to theological school. And then there's the other side, which is that people think that that's all a ruse. The left Hegelians and the young Hegelians say that no, Hegel is far more progressive, much more radical, atheistic, and his science is the predominant factor that overrides religion and theological thinking. We're going to show that he's doing it all. And that's the most mind-bending part of it, is that you can hold contradictions in unities. You can hold them together and make sense of them when you have the right order. So there's an order to everything in Hegel's system. And he says the world is really like this. It's not just in our heads. The world actually moves by this living logic. And the principal movement, the root of it, is something called sublation. That's probably the only unfamiliar high-level word that you might not have heard before. In fact, 99.9% of people on the planet right now haven't heard of it. But it is the central, I claim, that after reading him, that's the single greatest missing piece to realizing why his system is so relevant and why it's needed in terms of bridging all these divides, in terms of our logic, science, interpersonal dynamics, politics, all of it. He covered it all from beginning to end in this sublative way, this growing way, kind of like how a plant grows. It negates its prior stage, it cancels a prior stage, but it also preserves the information. The plant doesn't just, like when it goes from a seed to a stem, it doesn't just, the plant doesn't just die, or the previous information doesn't just go away. The previous information of the seed is actually actualizing itself in the stem and the leaves, and then the bud, and then the fruit. And everything in life is like that. If you're thinking philosophically and wisely, that's why all these mystics describe reality as very alive and conscious and all these types of things. But is that really true? It sounds really mystical and fantastic. Well, as we will see in Hegel's Science of Logic, not even in just his philosophy of religion or other texts. Hegel does call genuine philosophy, as opposed to abstract philosophy that we have today, the painful kind, full of egoism and battling and adversarial debates and trying to win and all this stuff. That's not real philosophy. It's supposed to be more like cooperative. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's like Plato's dialogues between cordial friends, or even if you're with your enemy, you turn your enemy into your friend in the process, in a process of self-recognition. Use the Socratic method, but using the Socratic method in a deeper systematic way that Hegel did, that Socrates understood intuitively, but didn't explicate in terms of his own system. So we're going to really get into the true interpretation of Georg Hegel by reading him start to end, beginning with what he considered his a possible introduction, or I think his true introduction. And most scholars think it's his first masterpiece, which he wrote in 1806-07, called The Phenomenology of Spirit. And it was his first major book that he published way late in life, like he was 36, 37. While all of his other friends, his genius friends, were famous by this point, he was just getting started. But he had done his homework in all those years, and that's why he reached such an incredible level. He had a lot of freedom to pursue philosophy for philosophy's sake, not for assignments, not for praise, not for anything. He did it to know the truth. And what we're going to do is start with this introduction, not the Phenomenology of Spirit, even though it's a great text. He said, I think it's more of a primer. It's where, like in terms of marketing, we have all these terms and things and fancies in our mind, our bells and whistles, our colors that we love, all this kind of stuff. Sensuousness. And he says that you're not going to understand sensuous. You're not going to understand the pure thought world of genuine philosophy if you're stuck in sensuousness. And so religion tried to approximate this by talking about sin and all this kind of stuff. But it's really the fixity of being in the material world that prevents this infinite world of pure thought from taking off and soaring into these incredible places of insight and wisdom. So what we're going to do is say the Phenomenology of Spirit is a primer. It is to use those categories that you're familiar with to get you out of ordinary consciousness into a feeling, an intuition that something more is happening. And it's just priming you with these words and emotions that are unfamiliar to you. He's doing the sublation thing over and over again. And so because you're not used to it, you're not going to grasp anything. Because in our ordinary thinking, we don't think that our categories of thought are ordered or growing like a plant. It's not a plant, right? There's no materiality there. It's just this movement of how these categories turn into each other. And for those that aren't big Hegel scholars, I am making these sessions a little more accessible. For those that maybe are autodidacts or trying to get out of the institution and realizing that there's something restrictive going on or unfair, that philosophy has been turned into an enterprise and put into a back corner, when really philosophy is universally felt by everybody. We all feel this calling, this yearning to know, to be the best that we can be, to discover. And so universality belongs to the real genuine philosophy, where it's not supposed to be in a back corner or a small kind of container. It's supposed to be this universal of all knowledge domains. And that's why it calls out to everybody who's rational, which is everybody. Every human being is separate from an animal because we can reason. So to develop this capacity is up to the individual, and those that are free are still free in mind. Hopefully they will find these lectures and receive a good starting point in terms of rigor. We are going to be reading Hegel directly, which is intense. It's like going from 0 to PhD. But even if not, even going from like intermediate to PhD with Hegel is like mind-boggling, right? So not many people understand Hegel, and I think that this will, with the proper introduction, get us past the stereotypes and get us into the true content for the first time. My name is Mark McCormack. My online name is Spirit Man, because Hegel says the point of this is to liberate spirit, and there's been a lot of superhero stuff around. So to kind of play on the current epoch, Spirit Man was supposed to be, or is, a way to be fictional but also truthful at the same time. That we are living an ideal in a way, but we're in still material reality. So my setup's not very glamorous at this point. As things progress, if these interpretations do have universals in them, this truth, this great truth to them, thanks to Hegel, then hopefully these setups will upgrade to better and better presentations that are easier to follow. But for those that are true in heart and spirit, you will see past the particularities of my current circumstances, as I also tried to pursue truth to the greatest ability that I can. So this is a countdown with a heart showing that this is all about love. In the end, Hegel's genuine philosophy is about self-recognition, this logic of love, or wise love. And a lot of Hegelian interpretations are of this, problem solution, problem reaction solution, which is being used, or many people think is being used to manipulate the masses, to implement a new world order because of the pandemic and all these wars and stuff like that are going on. But that's, of course, another one-sided reading of Hegel from people that didn't understand the full breadth of what it really means to be in these sort of structures of logic, that whether you like it or not, you're operating this way, it seems like. So it's all about love, and this is a symbol to protect these videos and myself, to show that we aren't into this interpretation of anything but liberating the spirit of people to think for themselves and self-determine. That's a huge thing for Hegel. You have to think determinately. You can have real thoughts that you can explicate, and you don't have to think wisdom as it's implicit or it's like intuitive. You can only feel it. You can't talk about it. It's ineffable. There is a moment for that, but once you have that moment, you can explicate it, and that's what his science of logic is trying to do. But my setup isn't too great to start this introduction in terms of materiality, but it's full of content. We have love here. There's 10 days before I have to make a big decision in terms of how I'm going to teach these lessons and keep myself going if nobody's able to support them in a material way. This is a teddy bear I got from a hunger strike I did to sort of get these lectures and get this material off the ground to change the world and introduce a new world spirit. I got this from the nurses at the hospital because I had to stay in there during Christmas because I got COVID in the hospital while I was recovering from this hunger strike. But we call this Sublating bear our sort of mascot for genuine philosophy so far. So this is kind of the setup as we get into the introduction, or what I think is the true introduction to Hegel's system. And what the true introduction, I believe, is this lectures on the history of philosophy. No, he also has a philosophy of history, but this is the history of philosophy, where he's talking about how philosophy developed itself in human contingency, in human actions, and sort of randomness to life. Philosophy is emerging and developing itself. So we're going to keep pursuing this direction, this true introduction, which many scholars actually dismiss. A lot of people don't pay attention to this. This is why you as a listener are getting something that's very unusual. And I'm an unusual person as well, because I'm willing to give this for free, because I don't really think that the way the intellectual enterprise is structured right now is fair to literally billions of people, especially genuine philosophy. So there's two things going on here that are already different and new from any sort of videos you will listen to on Hegel, and I will try and point them out as we go along, because otherwise what I'm saying you might not know is incredible or different or novel, or you're getting really the best in the world. And it's because I really don't just want to theoretically speak about this new way of doing philosophy. I want us to be it. And so this is a huge risk that I'm taking, in a way, giving this valuable information for free, because there's a general stereotype in economics that there are no free lunches, and when people see something free, they don't appreciate it because they think it's valueless. But philosophy is different, and intellectual property has to be restructured around this. But I think it's worth getting some large leaps out of the way so we can get our species sort of started in a new mode of wisdom that I think needs to begin with genuine philosophy, not abstract philosophy. So that's the first thing, is there is a distinction Hegel makes between abstract philosophy and genuine philosophy. So abstract philosophy, think of it like fragmentations. It's like there's fragments of truth, and there's great people in history that have like worked their whole lives on one fragment. And then there's other people who've tried to create systems, but the systems were also fragmented. They might have like systematic pieces, but nobody grasped genuine philosophy because their abstractions were too strong. Their separations and isolations of pieces weren't in this living unity, this organism that Hegel treats his philosophy as. That's what genuine philosophy is. It is a system that is complete in itself. That means it circles back on itself. Its beginning is its end, and its end is its beginning. It justifies itself, and it self-grounds itself. That's a special kind of word for people who are new. It just means that the reasons for its beginning are justified by its end. It has a ground that can sit on, that's solid, that makes sense. It's not just assumed or opinion or caprice. So genuine philosophy is this total system where all the parts are in a necessary order by one logic, one universal logic. And that's what Hegel gives for the first time. He takes all these other fragments of all these other philosophers from history, and he identifies what piece of philosophy they play. There's a principle in it. A principle is an ultra clear piece of wisdom. And it's often not in this special form of pure thought. But not only does genuine philosophy have to be in this sort of total system, and that has to be living in terms of the sublation, this universal logic, it also has to be in the medium of what he calls pure thought. So pure thought is where these principles are, and he distills them from all these other fragments. And the opposite of pure thought is sensuousness. So pure thought is supersensuousness. It means you can't taste it, touch it, smell it, all this kind of stuff in the material world. This is in your inner world, in what we call the mind. But the mind is far greater than people make it out to be. Hegel says it's actually what religion was calling spirit. It's this universal, it's beyond just you. You're actually connecting inwardly to another sort of realm of supersensuousness that is objective. So that has a lot of implications to it. But we're doing genuine philosophy here, and we're introducing it through human contingency in his history of philosophy. So we're going to do something really unique. Two things. Oh, I mentioned the first thing. So two unique things is, yes, one is what genuine philosophy is in contrast to abstract philosophy. So now you know that. A lot of people don't know that. So there you go. It's a big one right there. The second unique thing is where we're starting. So to make this more clear, we're not going to start with the phenomenology of spirit. If you want to get a primer and get confused and learn that you don't know anything, even though he's talking about categories you think you know, like sense certainty, perception, consciousness, master, slave, self-consciousness, reason, all these types of things, you're going to realize that you don't really. You're not going to recognize the motion and the way and the order that he's doing it. So once you're sufficiently confused, but you're intrigued, as a genuine philosopher, you'll be kind of rattled by that, but you'll be intrigued. Well, how did he do that with the categories that I already think I know? Well, once you get that feeling, it's going to hopefully prime you to want to read the history of philosophy. So there's a third clarification here that I'm going to make about the beginning. it's that once people grasp that the phenomenology of spirit, its real placement is actually towards the end of his real system. So this total system that's a circle, if you unfold the circle into a line, and the beginning is here, and the end is here, there's three main sections. There's the science of logic, the philosophy of nature, and then the end is called the philosophy of spirit, or philosophy of mind. Most people, once they grasp that the phenomenology of spirit is like over here in the last third, it's actually not even the beginning of it's like the second moment of the first moment of this final piece. It happens way at the end. And if you read the phenomenology of spirit's famous preface, he actually warns you and kind of gives you a clue. He says a lot has happened before you even get here. He says a lot's happening behind the back of consciousness, which is basically all these like hundreds and thousands of pages. Well, I think a few thousand pages. That are the other two sections, right? So once you grasp that the phenomenology of spirit is here, and you know it's not the true beginning, it's the true phenomenological beginning, but the true beginning of everything, not even just consciousness, but everything. Most people think starts with the science of logic, the first piece. That's true to a certain degree. That's the beginning of the system, of the real science that you'll be learning. That's where the true first thought, what he calls the first thought, the first principle, the first element begins, is with the science of logic. But before that happens, there's a introduction to how he got to, how Hegel got to developing this incredible way of doing science with pure logic. And this beginning is what we're going to start as the real introduction. This piece here is what he's calling the lectures on the history of philosophy. And he shows how he went through all of 3,000 years of modern human history and showed that each philosopher, one by one, was contributing certain pieces. And he's explaining those pieces and what their limits are. So that's what we're going to treat as the true beginning. And he even says this can serve as an introduction to his system. And that's when I realized when I was reading him, okay, so I was suspecting it, but then he said it. And I was like, got it. So it took thousands of hours, roughly, when I first started catching on, it was about 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours of reading Hegel directly. I wasn't reading him through other people. I already spent hundreds of hours doing that. And I found out that I was getting into spaces that didn't seem really that profound. But when I read Hegel directly, it was very painful. But once you get past the hump, he's doing something so profound that you're not expected to get it right away, because he's breaking us out of ordinary thinking, out of that abstract mode of philosophy, abstract mode of thinking. So treat that as a good thing. You're about to go on a journey that very few people have ever gone on, and those who have gone on it, in my opinion, have not understood completely what he was really saying. Even Marx, who explored Hegel for many hours, many years, I think grasped central pieces, but he didn't really seem to grasp the whole. And if he did grasp the whole and he tried to turn Hegel on his head, that's a famous saying of what Marx tried to do to Hegel, he still regarded Hegel as the master of dialectic, even after all his writings. And that's why we're going to start with Hegel, is because it seems like all these other philosophers missed something in the past. So I hope those Easter eggs help you, those golden nuggets, to get you into why what you're about to hear you may not hear anywhere else. And this is the first time it's being recorded and put online, and I'm hoping that maybe my presentations can become a little more spiffy as we go along. So we are starting, all that to say, we are starting with the likely true introduction to Hegel's system of genuine philosophy. And here it is up on the screen. So I'm taking this from Marxist.org, even though it's a Hegel text. Marxist.org believes in a different economic model where they're sharing this information for free. and it's accessible to you as well if you just go to this hyperlink. They are quite an amazing site, not high tech, but it has the content here. Okay. So not only are we going to begin with Hegel's history of philosophy, but I want to sort of do an experiment and show that his science of logic and his lesser logic, the encyclopedia logic, are all doing the same kind of thing, the same kind of order. So Hegel says all things are operating in the same logic, this universal logic, and it's just realizing itself in different forms. So the lectures on the history of philosophy are just talking about how he's exploring this logic in human events. And then the science of logic, in the introduction, he's explaining this order here. This is the order that we're going to be uncovering in the history of philosophy. It's all here in its purity. There aren't any human events here. These are the pure principles in pure thought form. This is the divine order. This is the absolute order. And it doesn't look like anything special, right? But what you are witnessing is incredibly profound. It is eternal. It has always existed. All of these things that look like human words, the names for these things are part of human caprice. It's what we just, we use our voice boxes to pronounce these syllogism and all this stuff. The names are arbitrary in a certain sense, but their meaning is not. What these represent are pure thoughts. And all these pure thoughts are eternal. Whatever we call them, we're just finding them in nature and in ourselves. So he develops this order, and this is absolutely incredible. We think that these are separate chapters, but they're actually, in some sense, one organic living whole. And the organic living whole is connecting not through these random chapters, but there's a direct jump from this to this, to this, to this, to this, to all these different sections. It's like one big living plant, one big plant of pure thought, one big organism. Okay, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense. The trick here is that the most boring and mundane categories of our thinking, like being, nothing, becoming, they're so familiar, they're boring. We don't ever think to question them. They're so boring and familiar. And Hegel says that's the trap. He says he's reviving the true incredibleness of these simple words by showing you their right order, what he calls speculative thinking. And speculative thinking, we're going to cover, is where the mystical nature returns back to our lives. The deadness we feel about being bored about our lives is because we are being disconnected from the right way, in the true living abundance of these words are in our minds now in this abstract, fragmented way, which means our philosophies are abstract, which means our wisdoms are broken and a little bit neurotic, which is why it's painful to be around each other. Okay, so this is the order purified from what we're covering in the history of philosophy. So then what is the encyclopedia version of the logic? Well, Hegel started running out of time. And so he wanted to write his entire system front to back to show people that he had done it. He had completed the whole circle, at least the first version. And so he thought it's too much for people to grasp the science of logic in his actual science of logic, the big divine order here. So what he said is, okay, he's going to create a more simple version, but keep the essential movements, the topmost movements, and keep bridging not just through the logic, but also through the philosophy of nature and the philosophy of spirit. So he's doing very kind of high level, going over the whole thing. It's still logical. And a lot of people mistake it to be, it's for high school students, it doesn't have any real value to it, but actually it's incredible. It's the whole thing there. And he kind of gives you places to deepen it in each section, which is what he was doing later in his life, is he was just filling out and connecting all these huge pieces of philosophy and positioning them in this order, in this encyclopedia. So what he means by encyclopedia, so here's another fourth nugget for you. I think we're on the fourth one, is that when Hegel talks about encyclopedia, he doesn't mean it in the ordinary sense. To him, an ordinary encyclopedia is a sort of arrangement of bodies of knowledge that are kind of being positioned by each other because there's something that relates them. You know, they're kind of categorizing them. There's no necessity to putting them in any kind of order. But Hegel says that's kind of arbitrary and due to the limits of human reason, not the limits of knowledge itself. The world isn't organized in this arbitrary way like an encyclopedia. But he says the way he organizes his encyclopedia, the true encyclopedia, is how the world is actually moving in its own knowledge. You're just a reflection of that in yourself. So he says a real encyclopedia connects all of its domains of knowledge in a necessary order. That means, you know, chemistry goes into biology, goes into psychology or anthropology, into psychology, into politics, on and on and on. That the complexity that we're seeing as we go up this encyclopedia is due to the prior stages growing into, through sublation, through that living logic, into the other categories. Now this sounds incredible, and to those who are still kind of stuck in maybe ordinary thinking, it might sound a little bit boring, that we're not saying anything truly profound here. But you have to sort of think it for yourself. You have to self-determine it to really experience this reconnection to the profound truths of the movement of things. So that's what I will say for now, that the introduction to the lesser logic, it's called, the encyclopedia logic, is still worth reading because it came later and Hegel kind of started filling things out more and provides more explanations. So that's why I'm going to go through all three, because usually scholars teach them separately or disconnected, or they don't realize that they're all saying the same thing in different ways. But to sort of make this connection concrete and to do something novel that hasn't been done anywhere else before, we're going to just try and go paragraph by paragraph and see if there's parallels. And it might be a little bit overwhelming at first, but I think if we go paragraph by paragraph, because Hegel actually structures them paragraph by paragraph, I think we'll be okay. The history of philosophy is not numbered, at least not in the version we have here. So it will be a little bit messy, but we're just going to experiment and see how it goes. And maybe what we'll do is end up just talking about the greater logic here, or the lesser logic, or just do these two. But for now, I'm just opening up why we're doing all three, is to show something that's really hard to demonstrate. So what you're going to find, and this is kind of a fifth nugget, golden nugget, what you're going to find is that as you read Hegel more deeply, something paradoxical starts to occur. And we experience it in every domain of knowledge, whether it's engineering, you know, chemistry, philosophy, psychology, that when you first start a new domain, it feels really overwhelming and it's complex and it seems really difficult. But once you learn the terms and the symbols, it starts to feel simple. And so the same thing is going to happen with Hegel, except it's going to be like 3 times more intense, that experience, because he has no actual jargon besides sublation. And you're going to find out why that's a necessary word and why it's very simple. But you're going to see this complexity of Hegel in these ordinary words. Like, he's not using crazy words. He's using ordinary words to create this incomprehensible experience. So that's like, well, he's using ordinary words. Why don't I understand even a single sentence, right? When you're first beginning, even a single sentence won't make sense, never mind a paragraph, never mind a page. So once that starts to untangle itself and the simple words start to become simple, you get this incredible feeling of simplicity. Like, it's all there. In these simple words we use every day, it's all there. It's just really this incredible experience where what was profoundly difficult in the beginning, to not just you or me or to everybody, it doesn't matter how smart you are, in the last 200 years, anybody who's read Hegel has been in some ways overwhelmed, especially in the beginning. to the point that most people don't even finish and read them all the way through because it's so painful to the ego. But I think I broke through that, and which is why I sort of got to at least the beginning of an understanding of the full circle, and not pigeonholing Hegel into these easy to attack boxes. So I think with that fifth Easter egg, we will try this experiment of jumping between these through to demonstrate this really difficult thing on the fourth point, which is this universality. I guess I should finish that point. The universality is the hard thing to show in this simplicity. So once you realize that the words are very simple, they're immediately graspable and understandable in very few parts at the high level. It's the fact that it's reoccurring. The simplicity is reoccurring everywhere. It's a universal simplicity, a universality to this kind of universal logic that is hard to show unless you show it in all these different forms, and that it's just reoccurring. So it causes a sense of self-recognition with the material, but it's a profound simplicity that, because of the universality, it encompasses all this complexity. And so this is this mystical kind of experience that all these gurus and these mystics and these prophets and divine ones and the Buddha, and they're all kind of speaking in this speculative way by uttering the most simple sentences. They would just unlock with pure clarity the right order of things, the right way of understanding something, this wisdom that was useful in the world but also beautiful at the same time. So to kind of expose that universality is why we're going through these three texts, because it will sound simple after a while, but I'm hoping to show the universality in a way that other people haven't done before. So there's quite a bit of novelty, hopefully, in this introduction, and you are, I believe, getting a one-of-a-kind, first-time experience of this way of interpreting Hegel, and what I believe is the true speculative freedom of how I think he was meant to be interpreted, and how he wrote and why he wrote the way he did. So where should we begin? Maybe what I will do is just put these in small 20-minute, half-an-hour fragments, and let other people kind of digest them the way they need to. But for now, I think that this is the true introduction. I have explained the other introductions and why that they are introductions, they are beginnings, but maybe not the true beginning that Hegel basically used to arrive at his system. So let me stop it there. I hope you enjoyed that, and you value the comments and the content already. But in the next session, we will pick up on the actual reading of the texts and start grounding ourselves in what this masterful, genuine philosopher Hegel really said. And as you will see at the top here, with Wisdom Quiz, the Synchronicity document, live sublations, those will also be updating as I continue these sessions. So hopefully we begin to see this kind of progression occurring as the numbers begin to grow, because even this worldwide Bible study, the worldwide Quran, the worldwide Veda, the Synchronicity document of philosophies, they are also doing the same thing that we're going to be teaching in the Science of Logic, the History of Philosophy, and the Encyclopedia of Logic, is we're showing the universality of that logic. It's everywhere. It's in the Bible, it's in the Quran, it's in the Vedas, it's in the Tripitaka, it's in the Synchronicity document, which has, in those numbers you currently see, the 111 is showing you that there's 111 philosophers and their philosophies in that document. Each one of them has a column that you can go and visit, and it shows the order of their concepts, their principles, those little nuggets of wisdom in this order compared to Hegel. And so there's 47 pure thoughts, what I'm calling ideas, in the order in this document so far, but Hegel had hundreds. So it's just the beginning, and the edits are us editing each column and changing the orders. And so far there's been 21, at least there's been more, but so far in the updated document there's been 21 reorderings and like thinking about like other people's philosophies and putting them in this universal logic. And live sublation is just about the people that we talk to one-on-one. We're using the same logic, and you can sublate with them. That's the interpersonal dialectic. So you can watch the Sessions of Spirit to see how an ideal philosopher goes about that sublation in a practical sense, not just in the theoretical sense. And so I've done that with, I think, one person so far, where they generally went from negating to sublating. So negating means separating, abstracting, isolating as two opposites that don't belong together, seeing them as separate. And sublation is seeing that this opposition, this negation, is itself negated into a higher unity, which holds that negation, these two, as moments, as ideal moments in this new whole. And they belong together in this order, in this living order. So as we get more and more people understanding this, live sublations will be transmuting those negations into sublations. And that's when we're going to start seeing this blessedness, this peace, kind of start taking off worldwide. Sounds simple, but that's kind of the point. Everybody can grasp it if it's sort of taught in a speculative way. Once people grasp or are sublated and they understand there's a point to this, they can then take the wisdom quiz. And so far we have 15 people that have taken it and that have passed. And what it's checking for is sublation. Can you sublate these contradictions in history and pull them into these concrete unities? So far we have 10 Bible passages put in this order, and we have 10 Quran verses put in this kind of order. And we're just going to go through and show that our understandings are more complete of these divine texts by grasping this universal logic, what in religious studies might be called the essence of God. In atheism or secular science, it's the science of sciences, the sort of theory of everything actual and possible and probable, maybe. But this is what those numbers represent. They're also an introduction. They're a beginning into practical spirit. Because for Hegel, another little nugget, maybe the sixth one, is that most people think philosophy is just theoretical. But another criterion, on top of it being, genuine philosophy is a system that is living, that is a universal logic, that necessarily orders all the pieces in that necessary encyclopedia, and that it's in the realm of pure thought, is that it's not just theoretical, it's practical. It's not just theoretical spirit, it's practical spirit, that those two together, theoretical spirit and practical spirit, sublate into a third free spirit. And the whole point of genuine philosophy is that liberation of spirit into genuine freedom. Not abstract freedom, which means doing random, negate anything you want. There's a destiny, a kind of necessity mixed with your genuine choice, your free will. And those together in your practical and theoretical spirit is where you align with this higher kind of wisdom inside of yourself, that you self-determine and create simultaneously while discovering it for yourself. Very speculative, very paradoxical, but it makes profound sense in a simple way once we grasp the order and that universality of that kind of philosophy. So we're embodying it theoretically, which is why we're reading the text, but the numbers at the top is part of this peaceful revolution as world spirit comes forward with these new universals and principles to transform abstract philosophy that we have today into this universal philosophy. And a genuine philosopher is somebody who deals in the medium of pure thought, whatever the domain, universally, physics, chemistry, math, ontology, epistemology, psychology, anything, politics, international politics, all that stuff. When a genuine philosopher comes into it, is finding the principles of pure thought and connecting them to the encyclopedia of the philosophical sciences as one organism. So that's the essential definition. That's what we're doing here in introducing you to. And I hope those 6 nuggets will start inspiring you to the work that I and other philosophers have dedicated our lives towards. And I think it is true that this is the missing piece in terms of a peaceful revolution, in terms of a new world spirit instead of a new world order, and that hopefully this gets recognized by, I think on this side of the screen, the Nobel Prizes as some of the greatest and pure-hearted gifts to humanity for research and basically philosophy that is supposed to serve all of humanity. And that's the point we left off on the 38th session of Spirit, that we're going to unite all the philosophers of the world and have this higher sense of recognition and clarity about who we really are. And the Nobel Prizes are the practical, our current epoch's version of this recognition mechanism that's crucial, and kind of is what the whole point is all about, this moment of wise love, of living together, not just tolerating each other. And because the logic is universal, we have a chance to win it with logic, which is why we're starting with the logic here, because the logic then, once you grasp it, is just being applied to those other sections of nature and then of spirit or the mind. So once you learn the linchpin, the logic, you apply it as an applied logic, still philosophy, genuine philosophy, in the other areas, and it kind of circles back on itself. So that's why once we grasp that peace, or universal peace, the logic of peace is the science of logic, then we can apply it to physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and sort of start winning the Nobel Prizes for this comprehensive way of dealing with science and putting these sciences into their necessary order and context. So if you want to add some philosophers to the synchronicity document, go ahead. If you want to take the wisdom quiz, if we've already sublated, feel free, go ahead. The higher that number in the green, what the wisdom quiz gets, the more people passing, the more genuine philosophers start to come into the world, and they start operating by reacting in sublation and not just negation. And that creates this more peaceful process of self-discovery through science, rather than war or these things we're going to cover in the history of philosophy a little bit, but you can read more about in the philosophy of history, where Hegel's more into the details of human affairs, not just the philosophies of it. So I hope you found that very interesting. If you're interested in some other introduction, you can start in any of those other places, but I think that this is the true introduction, and we'll jump between them, all three texts, to get this impression of something very hard to teach that I don't think is graspable in the other way scholarship has been moving. And right now, because there is a resurgence in Hegel, there is this divide starting up again, this right Hegelianism and this left Hegelianism. It's starting up again. And I'm seeing both sides of the scholarship starting to negate each other, and we're just repeating history. So the reason why I'm getting these lectures out in this sort of, very simple way is because time is of the essence, and I think we have a chance to do something different and return back to the principle of genuine philosophy, Hegel, and unfold what he really said. So thank you for participating in this introduction, not only to Hegel but to the series. I think we might call them Scintillating Science of Logic. Somebody named it, but we will see. And hopefully I'll see you on the next one.